The ending of Primal has finally arrived, and with it, all the tension and drama the series carefully built over time. Episode after episode, we witnessed a story that, without relying on dialogue, managed to deliver suspense, danger, and truly unforgettable moments. All of this helped establish Primal as one of the most unique and compelling works in modern animation. But beyond what we've already seen on screen, there's still one big question left. What happens next? That's exactly why this analysis shifts its focus forward, looking ahead to imagine what the future of this universe might hold. One of the biggest topics among fans right now is the possibility of a new season. The world of Primal has proven it still has a lot to offer. Whether it's exploring new lands, introducing new creatures, or bringing in threats powerful enough to once again push our characters to their limits, the potential is definitely there. And that naturally leads to another question. What kind of villains or conflicts could come next? Throughout the series, we've already seen powerful enemies and extreme situations that pushed the protagonists to the edge. But the world of Primal still has vast, unexplored territories, opening the door to new stories, new creatures, and even bigger confrontations that could expand the scope of the narrative even further. Taking all of this into account, the ending of this chapter doesn't really feel like a definitive conclusion for the Primal universe. Instead, it works more as a transition point, one that leaves several paths open to continue the story from different angles. That's why, in this video, we're going to break down some of the most likely scenarios for what could come next. We'll talk about potential villains, new storylines, and the kinds of adventures that might be waiting for the characters who are still part of this world. So stick around, because we're about to dive into different theories and interpretations that all try to answer one key question. Where could the story of Primal go if this universe continues to expand into a new season? Now, one of the most important details shows up in the final scene of the last episode. As we've mentioned in previous videos, this moment could be interpreted, at least to some extent, as a possible retcon of the Season 2 ending, since Spear appears once again. But what really stands out isn't just his presence. If you look closely, you'll notice that his arm appears to be fully restored. Even the tone of his skin looks normal again, leaving behind that pale, almost lifeless appearance he had before. This detail opens the door to several interpretations. On one hand, it could suggest that over time, his body fully regenerated. But on the other hand, there's also the possibility that it's simply an animation inconsistency. That said, this second option feels unlikely when you consider the level of production quality the series is known for, especially the careful direction of Genndy Tartakovsky. In a show that pays such close attention to both visual and narrative detail, a change this noticeable in a character's condition is hard to dismiss as just a simple mistake. On top of that, there's another detail that makes that explanation even more complicated. In earlier episodes, it was made clear that regenerating body parts required the constant use of the black substance. This liquid acted as the key element that kept the regeneration process going. The problem is that, based on what we saw in the final events, all of that substance was seemingly lost when the volcano erupted. With the destruction of that location, the only known source that allowed this process to continue was gone as well. And this is where the final scene becomes truly interesting. Because if the substance was no longer available, and yet Spear still appears with his arm fully restored, then the series is clearly leaving us with a deliberate ambiguity. An ambiguity that practically invites us to speculate about what really happened. In other words, this moment becomes a key piece for theories about the future of the story, because it raises a very direct question. How was it possible for Spear to recover his arm if the very element that enabled that regeneration no longer existed? That question is exactly what opens the door to new interpretations within the Primal universe. And depending on how you look at it, it could become one of the most important clues for understanding what the series is actually trying to suggest with that final scene. This is where things shift into much more theoretical territory. The ending leaves multiple interpretations open, and a big part of that comes from the fact that we see Spear's daughter again. Just as it had been hinted before, everything points to her being destined to carry on her parents' legacy. On top of that, Spear himself appears in that final moment, reinforcing the idea that there are still elements of the story that can continue to be explored. In a way, the season's ending makes it clear that the story doesn't necessarily end there. By showing us Spear's daughter at a later stage in her life, the series suggests that his legacy could live on through her. This opens the possibility for future stories to focus on this new generation within the same world. Additionally, Genndy Tartakovsky has officially mentioned in multiple interviews that he would like to continue developing the series. Initially, the project was envisioned as more of an anthology, exploring different stories within this universe. However, the return of our favorite caveman, along with the way this chapter of the narrative was wrapped up, leaves the door open for the story to remain connected to the characters we already know. This means the story of Spear doesn't necessarily have to be left behind entirely. Even if his main arc has reached a conclusion, the appearance of his daughter, now grown into a young adult, creates a natural path for the adventure to continue from a new perspective, while still preserving the core spirit that has defined the series from the very beginning. On top of that, recent events also introduced a character who could play a key role in the start of a potential new season. The child who was taken by the beasts. His presence in the story, combined with the glimpse of a more stable future, leaves open the possibility that he could return later on. From that angle, it wouldn't be surprising if he eventually became a close companion to Spear's daughter. And within a broader development of the story, it could even evolve into a deeper relationship between the two characters. Of course, all of this would ultimately depend on the direction the narrative chooses to take in a possible continuation. If we bring all these elements together, the overall picture becomes really interesting. On one hand, we have Spear's daughter as a potential protagonist, carrying on her parents' legacy. On the other hand, Fang's offspring could also play a major role in whatever comes next within this world. Putting these characters together could naturally lead to a new central group in the story, a new team that, while staying true to the essence of Primal, would have the chance to face unknown creatures, unexplored territories, and completely new kinds of challenges. And this is exactly where the discussion starts to feel more grounded. If the series truly decides to continue, it will most likely build on the elements that were already set up in the ending itself. So that leads us to the big question. What could we expect from a potential Season 4? One of the clearest options would be to move forward into a new story arc set in the future of the Primal universe. This would allow the story to feel fresh by focusing on the next generation, showing how the descendants grow and adapt within such a hostile world. It could even bring back the anthology-style format, where each episode explores different stages of their lives, from childhood to adulthood. Another possibility would be to pick up the story right where the timeline leaves off and follow the family's journey more directly. That way, we could watch the children grow and see how they begin to face the dangers of this world on their own. There's also the option of shifting the focus back to Spear, specifically to the process of fully restoring his arm. As we saw in that future scene, his arm is already healed, so part of the narrative could revolve around explaining how he managed to regenerate it. This could involve searching for the black substance again, or even introducing an entirely new method of regeneration. In fact, a storyline like that could take the characters back to the volcano, the very place that was supposedly destroyed after the eruption. Considering that the series has already handled multiple story arcs within a single season, it wouldn't be surprising to see that structure return. The first half could focus on Spear's recovery, while the second half introduces a new villain, or a threat powerful enough to put the protagonists in danger once again. In short, the possibilities for a new season are wide open. The growth of the children, new adventures led by the next generation, the mystery behind Spear's restored arm, or even a more character-driven story centered on the bond between father and daughter, showing how Spear steps back into his role as a guide and protector in a world that remains just as dangerous as ever. Now, if a new season does happen, it probably won't be right away. For context, Season 3 took around 4 years to develop. That makes sense when you consider that there was about a 2-year gap between Seasons 1 and 2, while the wait for Season 3 was even longer, mainly because Season 2 was originally intended to be the definitive ending of the series. However, with this much more open-ended conclusion, it's possible the wait won't be as long this time. If production timelines go back to what we saw in the earlier seasons, it wouldn't be unrealistic to imagine a Season 4 arriving sometime around 2028. Another important factor is that Genndy Tartakovsky has also been working on other projects during this time, including the animated film Fixed and the series Unicorn Warriors Eternal. both of which required a significant amount of his involvement. Even so, based on what he's mentioned in various interviews, the strong reception from fans and the fact that episodes continue to rack up views keeps the possibility of a new season very much alive. So while the series might take a few more years to return, the ongoing interest it generates shows that there's still plenty of room to keep expanding this universe. And as the creator himself has said more than once, Primal is a story that can keep going as long as there are new ideas to explore. In that sense, for its creator, Primal is practically timeless.